Alright gang, getting into 2014 constructed responses. As always, please make sure you've read the question on your own before watching. Read it more than once if you have to. I usually do, to wrap my brain around stuff. And try to do that and regroup like before each part, because again, sometimes you get stumped on part A and therefore you might have no chance of even attempting part B without doing part A. So once I do part A, for example, try to just pause again and see if you can do part B on your own first before watching the rest of the video. So here we go. Half gallon per minute. That sounds like a rate to me, which probably means it's going to be a slope. But anyway, the question wants to know how many total gallons of water will be in the wash tub when the faucet has been on for 5 minutes. So some key information, right? 6 gallons in the first place. Sorry, it's a little bold. Anyway, so 6 gallons are already in the wash tub. That's the kind of thing, after reading it carefully, you notice and you kind of that's a major detail, right? You got to kind of start to get a grip on how that's going to play into the mathematics. You know what I mean? So 6 gallons of water already in the wash tub, and a faucet is filling it up at a rate of a half gallon per minute. So how many total gallons? 5 minutes. So at a half of a gallon for every minute for 5 minutes, that's a simple little multiplication situation. And 1/2 times 5 should be 2.5 gallons. All right. We just assume that GAL is the shorthand for gallons. So that's 2.5 more gallons that were added onto the 6 that were already in the wash tub after 5 minutes. And so when you add, look, quick point, if they had wanted you to show all of your work, if that would have been part of the directions, you would have definitely needed to show this, and it wouldn't have hurt, it might even be necessary to include the units like half a gallon per minute, 5 minutes, 2.5 gallons, and then you would have also had to literally write out this step where all you're doing is you're adding the 2.5 onto the 6. So look, we didn't have to do that here, but you got to be aware or be ready for the fact that they want you to sometimes show literally every piece of math that would on your way to getting the final answer. So 8.5 gallons. Moving on to part B. When the faucet has been on for X minutes, there will be Y gallons. So X minutes, Y is for gallons, and they want us to come up with the equation. Okay, so, and they don't actually want a specific form as far as like slope-intercept form, or point slope form, or standard form, or some random I don't know. But anyway, considering that we're just going to take the number of minutes and multiply it by 1/2, because it's 1/2 gallon every minute, so it makes sense to multiply 1/2 times some unknown number of minutes. So we have like X filling in as like a varying number of minutes, and so you multiply that by the 1/2, and then don't we have to tack on that 6 gallons that was already in there? And so look, 1/2, like I mentioned earlier, 1/2 ends up being your slope or your rate, for your equation. And this 6 gallons that was already in there, like the number of gallons at 0 minutes, that ends up being your y-intercept, technically, if you were to graph this. Part C. Using your equation, determine the number, well, they're just, I don't know. I don't know if they're like, I don't know if they're trying to give you extra help. They're like telling you, it's like, hey, use your equation. You know, it's like extra help. I don't know. They think you're stupid or something. Determine the number of minutes from when the faucet is turned on until there are exactly 23 3/4 gallons of water left up. So the equation was, I'm just going to go down here. Right? And here's how you use your equation. They're giving you a value of gallons. Gallons was the y variable. So it's our y variable that represents number of gallons. So all we really have to do, again, I've said this before in other videos, or at least one other video, this is a classic constructed response deal, or a multiple choice. It's a keystone. It's classic keystones, where you have an equation and it's got two variables and they give you a value of one variable and expect you to solve for the other one. In this case, they're giving you a value for y. And I want you to notice what I just did. You know, bottom line, 23.75 is, I think, a little bit easier to work with than the mixed number of 23 3/4. So, and you know what? I could even take that one step further and change the 1/2 to a decimal as well and just make it 0.5. But now look, gang, okay, the rest of this is just, now I want to solve for x. I want to know, say, look, determine the number of minutes. Translation, what's x? So we're going to get x by itself. 23.75 minus 6. Might as well be extra careful and just use a calculator. Oops, wrong button. See how easy it is? You just press the wrong button. You got to pay attention to what you're doing. Otherwise, you can make like the most silly mistake ever just by accidentally hitting a wrong button and not realizing it. So now what would I do technically? You know, if that was a 0.5, I could divide both sides by 0.5. You could technically divide both sides by 1/2, which is the same as multiplying by 2. But no matter how you slice it here, you're going to end up getting 35.5 for x, which is like, you know, your number of minutes. 35.5 minutes to get to 23 3/4 gallons. I guess you didn't really have to use your equation. I'm sure you could have figured out another just basic way to do this, but if they say use your equation, or if they say, well, what I'm really saying is, if they made it a point to say show all of your work, you know, then this would have been something they might have been looking for. Or whatever other method you were doing, you better show all that reasoning or work written down if they want you to show your work. Last part. They're trying to get this a little bit, you know, trixier. A second wash tub. Oh, here we go. Already contains 2 gallons of water. All right. Okay. A larger faucet is used to fill this wash tub at a rate of 1. Okay, here's where you got to read carefully. This rate is 1.5 times the rate of the first faucet, which was just 1/2. So our new rate, this is reading comprehension here, people. We're going to do 1.5 times 1/2. Once again, just you want to be like as clever as possible, I guess. I would recommend doing decimals. 1.5 is really 1.5. and 1/2 is really 0.5. If you want to work with fractions, whatever, using your calculator, not needing your calculator, I don't care. Fractions, decimals, but you're going to get, when you do that multiplying to get this new faster rate, you're going to get a final rate of 0.75. In other words, if you were working with fractions, it would be 3/4, 3/4, 3/4. Anyway, so that takes care of that part. What are they asking for? They say both faucets are turned on at the same time. Determine the number of minutes until both wash tubs contain the same number of gallons. Okay. Well, one strategy you can do is make a minute by minute tally, right? You could sort of go like, well, the first faucet went 6, 6.5, 7, like this was after 1 minute, this was after 2 minutes, this was after 3 minutes, and you just, and same thing for the second faucet, where was it starting off with 2, and then 2.75 after 1 minute, and then 3.5, I believe. Wait, yep, pretty sure. And just kind of like keep that going, a minute by minute tally, like a minute by minute chart, until they matched. You know what I mean? And you would hope that it wouldn't take forever, and you would hope also that you get like a nice answer of like a whole number of minutes, right? So that's one way to do it, and I'm sure it will work just fine. But I'm going to do this way, where we take our first equation. Come on. This was for the first faucet, and we could have written an equation for the second faucet, right, of 0.75 or 3/4 x, and then what was the plus 2, because we start off with 2, basically like your y-intercept. And so why don't I just do this? Why don't I go ahead and change this 1/2 to 0.5, same thing. And now guess what? I can solve this for x by getting the x's only on one side. So on the left side, we still have that positive 6, 0.75, so that should be 0.25x, and we still have that plus 2. Now I want that x to be the only thing on that right side, so I'm going to undo the plus 2 to get that out of there. Get out of there. So now we have 0.25x by itself, and over here we now have 4. And now we're going to divide both sides by 0.25. And I think we're going to get 16. Let me just double check on my calculator. Man, I'm good. So you get x equals 16, or 16 equals x. Same thing. But that's what they wanted, right? Determine the number of minutes. So that's the final answer. Number of minutes, number of minutes. Yep. And that's that.